No issue. The primary intention of this instruction course is, in the cataract surgery, we wish to see two visit is very important to us. One is definitely the first post-op visit, maybe within 24 hours. And the next visit is after 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. So this particular IC is being aimed with galaxy of young surgeons and the old peoples like us to give some input, especially those who are learning. Sometimes something comes beyond our expectations. We do not like it, we do not desire it, we do not expect it. Even from the patient perspective, also the patient doesn't expect it. So every attempt has been made by, especially I am thankful to Dr. Swaraj Bhattacharya, my colleague, who has taken the pain to organize this IC, that what are the precautions we can take over so that this undesirable effect, the undesirable outcome, what is not expected, next day we can minimize the risk. Yes, we understand. After taking all the precautions, still we may land into a turbulent scenario. So we are not dealt this particular IC is not being aimed at how to deal with this turbulence. May not be the most important one, like much talked about endophthalmitis, prevention of endophthalmitis, the difference between TAS and endophthalmitis. These are very small practical tips, which I believe will be effective for the young ophthalmologist.
Thank you, sir. So good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible?
No, sir.
Myself, Dr. Swaraj Bhattacharya from Tinsukia, Assam, and Dr. Ratish Pal from Kolkata. Both of us, the chairman of the update session. Welcome everybody in this virtual conference 2021. We all know that the cataract surgery is becoming more of a refractive surgery, and patient expect a wow always. In the first part of the course, as our Dr. R.C. Paul said, uneventful surgery done. Next morning, there is thundering storm. But why? Our speakers are trying to find the cause and suggesting modalities to correct it, and especially focus on the ways to prevent it happen. The second part will be a video session where the presenter will try to deal with the tricky cataract situation and how to bail it out. I'd like to share the screen. At the onset, I like to show a very small video where we can see the doctor is trying to hide himself from the present scenario. But we should take all precaution, but still it may happen, and we should know how to avoid this punch. We had a galaxy of speakers, namely Dr. Gyanankar Medhi. He's a renowned corneal surgeon from Guwahati, followed by Dr. Jayashree Borgohain, prolific phaco surgeon, head of the Comprehensive and Community Service, Tezpur Eye Hospital, Assam. Next, we have Dr. Ratish Chandra Pal, eminent cataract surgeon and mentor for many of us. Next is myself, Dr. Swaraj Bhattacharya from Tinsukia, Assam. Next is Dr. Madhusudhan Mandal, young dynamic surgeon from Sushrut Hospital, Kolkata. We had with us Dr. Aniruddha Maiti, renowned retina surgeon from Kolkata. We had Dr. Smiti Rani Srivastav, associate professor in the Department of Ophthalmology, IPGMR and SSKM Hospital, Kolkata. Dr. Amarendra Deka, Senior Cataract and Refractive Surgeon from Guwahati. Dr. Manas Nath, Young Anterior Segment Surgeon from ASG Eye Care, Kolkata. Dr. Amit Raj, Additional Professor and Head of the Department of Ophthalmology, AIMS, Patna. And last, we had Dr. Sugaranjini, another young dynamic surgeon from Kochi, Kerala. This is our team. With this, I think we'll go directly to our program. We had 6 speakers. Everyone is allotted 8 minutes of time. May I now invite our first speaker?
One request. Who is there in the audiovisual team? There is a request from one of our panelists, Dr. Gyanendra Medhi. Please allow him as a panelist. Please allow him as a panelist. He is trying to join, but is not being able to join. Who is there from audiovisual?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I already promote to the panelist.
Okay, okay.
There is some technical issue. The bandwidth is too much slow.
Okay. Dr. Medhi.
Yeah, he's there.
Is there?
Yeah, I'm just in.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
The first speaker is Dr. Gyanankar Medhi. His topic is cloudy cornea. Why so?
A very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharjee, for the opportunity. I'm Dr. Medhi from Guwahati. When you leave a surgery at this point, the next day morning you want to see good things. This is not something that you look for. So an uneventful surgery done, oh my God, why this storm next day? So why do you have cloudy corneas? What can be the reason? No financial disclosures. So here are some scenarios that I would like to share. We can have a cloudy or hazy cornea on the first post-op day. It can be total or sectoral. When you try to look closely in the anterior chamber, there is no reaction. If the edema is too much, you cannot see beyond the corneal stroma. But if you try to look very hard, you might see some flap-like thing floating in the anterior chamber. What could this be? And if you have access to a tool like an ASOCT, you might find the Descemet membrane which has got detached and hanging in the anterior chamber. So this could be a reason for your hazy corneal edema on the first post-op day. As I said, it could be sectoral also. Here in this case, you can see only one part of the cornea is edematous. When you do a slit lamp examination, you can find the detached Descemet membrane which responds very well to your air tamponade. Second scenario, you have a hazy cornea, you have Descemet membrane folds, and the AC is quiet, there's no reaction. What could be the reason for that? As we all know, any cataract surgery, even the perfect cataract surgery, does cause endothelial cell loss around the range of 4.5 to 9%. So if you have a pre-existing weak corneal endothelium which was not diagnosed beforehand, or if you had an ICE syndrome or reduced endothelial cell count following viral keratitis or endothelitis, we might have such a situation where the cornea becomes hazy on the first post-op day. In such a situation, it is nice to evaluate the other eye and look for any signs that might help you come to a diagnosis, especially for cases of Fuchs. Here is a patient of Fuchs endothelial dystrophy. It was in the early stage, so I did a phaco surgery. At 2 months post-op, patient had 6/12 vision and was unhappy. The reason being that if you look very closely, you can see the amount of catheter that is there in the central pupillary axis. Scenario 3, you have a corneal edema, eye is soft, and there's a shallow AC. The probable cause is there's a wound leak somewhere, and the hypotony is the cause of that corneal edema. Dr. Jayashree is going to talk on this, I think. Yeah. On the opposite end, you have a diffuse corneal edema, limbus to limbus. You might find small microcystic edema, bulle sort of thing on the epithelium. The cause can be reversed. Instead of hypotony, it could be a raised IOP. This is something a little bit more frightening. You have a post-op day angry looking eye, corneal edema from limbus to limbus once again. There's anterior chamber reaction in various grades. The Pupil might be dilated, IOP may be normal or slightly decreased initially. This is the dreaded toxic anterior segment syndrome. It's a sterile postoperative inflammation, mainly from irrigating solutions or intracameral drugs or from preservatives. There can be also endotoxin contamination of the sterilized instruments or detergent residues on the instruments. These can be very severe and cause corneal decompensation and trabecular meshwork damage. This condition has to be differentiated from endophthalmitis, which has posterior segment involvement. Dr. Paul is going to talk about TAS. This is the most dreaded stormy event in the first post-op there for any ophthalmic surgeon. You have a cloudy cornea, severe ciliary congestion, anterior chamber reaction, hypopyon, and then poor fundal glow. And this is none other than the dreaded endophthalmitis. And this should bring everything into aggressive treatment mode. Just to recapitulate, why this storm the next day? The surprise factors could be a DM detachment, undiagnosed corneal disease, TAS, endophthalmitis, or hypotonia or raised IOP. Now, this is a scenario which is quite common on the roads of India. You see a truck which has undergone some accident, but by the grace of God, usually the driver is safe and unhurt, which basically means if you, as a surgeon, is leading an eventful surgery, then you should be prepared for the storm next day. Here are some situations where you are mentally prepared for a storm next day. If you have a hard brown cataract and you end up doing phaco and use a lot of energy, you are definitely going to get corneal edema as expected. Luckily, most of this resolve over time, but it always makes sense to do an SICS in these hard cataracts. Just to enumerate other conditions where you can have a stormy first post-op day, you can have an inadvertent IOL endothelium touch. There may be excessive manipulation in a complicated cataract or surgical complications. There might be vitreous in the anterior chamber or retained lens fragment, which usually present with late and corneal edema. But then if we go by our title, these are not uneventful surgeries, these are eventful surgeries. So this is the entire list of causes which can cause corneal edema after a cataract surgery. But once again, if you have to say uneventful cataract surgery, you have to exclude some of them. So the war is not over now. How do you manage these situations? See, management or treatment is always according to the cause. In case of mild edema, you can observe. You can add hypertonic saline solution.
I have.
Yes, fine.
It's not coming. I have put
coming,
it on slideshow.
Coming.
It's fine. Okay. Fine. Very good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be speaking on the next surprise. Oh, where did I miss the link? Now, surprises are surprises because it's coming. Okay, thank you so much. Now, you know, surprises are surprises because they can catch you anytime, anywhere. So now, even when we are doing an uneventful surgery, a regular surgery for us also can prove to be the deadliest nightmare for us. So this is a single case report where I had done just a simple surgery, a simple SICS was done, but I had the storm the next day. Why? So we have to be prepared for any unpleasant surprise from time to time. So when this topic was allotted to me, the first thing that came to our mind was the incision versus lake concept. And as we are already aware, the clear corneal incisions, they have a relatively poor wound stability as compared to the sclerocorneal tunnels, which has a better sealing property. So I went to search, I did an extensive search of my phaco cases so that I could get a single case where I had the wound leak the next day. But I couldn't encounter a single case. Does this mean that all my wounds are perfect? No, that was not the case. It was because in the cases where there was any doubt regarding the wound architecture, those cases were taken care of on table itself. So I didn't have to meet a surprise the next day. Then I was suggested by someone to have a look through the SICS cases. Now, since I had sutured even the 2.2 millimeter incisions when I had any doubt, so back of the mind, I was reluctant that will I leave such a big SICS wound unsutured if I feel that there is a defect in the wound. But nevertheless, I started with the search. So does this mean that wound leak today is a less common complication? Definitely, it has become less common. Why? Because of the development of technology, because of the improvement in our phaco machines. But nevertheless, when it encounters, it can be very stressful for the surgeon because back of the mind, you have the fear, the dread of endophthalmitis. So we have to take proactive steps. We have to be prepared ahead of time to minimize the occurrence. And should a setback occur, we have to be prepared to deal with it. Casual behavior is not allowed in any surgery. A perfect wound architecture has to be achieved. And whenever we have even the slightest doubt that the integrity of the wound is not okay, we should suture it, because how we do the surgery, no doubt it's important, but what we leave behind at the end of the surgery is going to have a long effect on the patient. So this is a regular SICS case that has been done. So at no point of time did I notice the chamber collapsing, nor at any moment did the iris prolapse out. All the steps of SICS were going on smoothly. I prefer doing a slightly bigger side port that enables me to do the superior cortex aspiration, so it becomes easier. So the tunnel has been done, and once the tunnel and the rhexis has been done, almost the surgery is over. Now all I need to do is to take the nucleus out. So here the nucleus is out and my surgery is over, because now I just have to put the IOL and I go back home. And next day when I come to the OPD for my post-op rounds, I am welcomed by this long list of complications, the problems that the patients had, starting from corneal folds, hyphema, AC reactions, shallow AC, and whatnot. Now, what do I do now with this patient? So there were two options. I patched the eye, I gave him cycloplegic, I asked him to go back and revisit me with the assurance that his vision will improve in a day or two, or I take the patient to the OT and reevaluate my case. And I decided to go with the second option. Now, when something goes wrong, it is very important when we make a mistake that we analyze where we went wrong. So we need to analyze our action before we take the next step. So what I did, I had to reevaluate where I was wrong. So it took me to a quick video analysis of what I had actually performed the previous day. So the incision site, the placement of the incision, the tunneling, the tunnel length, the side port, everything looked fine. So where was the mistake? Now, had I known that I had committed a mistake in the first place, I would have tried to rectify it on the table. But was it that there was some problem and I was too lazy to suture the case? I don't think so in this case. Did I not realize the mistake? Maybe it was beyond my knowledge. Maybe some of the steps which I was thinking that I have done perfectly, maybe it was totally wrong. Or did I miss out on something? Or was there no mistake at all? But whatever be the cause, I had to take up the patient, and here the AC wash has been done to remove the hyphema. Visco is injected, and even after visco, the softness of the globe, that means my wound is definitely wrong. And here we can see the little bit of iris tissue out here. That means somehow I had missed making my tunnel longer. I had made the tunnel length adequate, but the entry into the tunnel was not perfect in this case. So suturing was done and the patient was sent back home. Now, had I been given the opportunity to redo this case, what I would have done differently? For me, this is an old video of mine. So nowadays I go for the transconjunctival approach because I am not in favor of cauterization, because it definitely causes some amount of damage to your ocular tissues. And also it hampers with the healing process, and there is some amount of shrinkage. I would have made a longer tunnel in this case. The tunnel length should have been longer. Tunnel hydration is also important, which I didn't do in this case because we are taking out the entire nucleus in toto. So some amount of cortical remnants may remain between the two lips, which may hamper the healing process. And another important point, whether we remove the speculum or our assistant removes the speculum after surgery, it is very important to check for IOP after removing the speculum, because it might not happen every day, but one fine day you may land up in complication like this, where there was an inadvertent pressure on the lip, on the posterior lip, and some amount of aqueous coming out. So we have to be careful about this. And especially relating to this case, in MSICS, wound architecture is very important. You need to have your tunnel valvular effects correct. You need to have a square incisional geometry. But speaking about SICS, this shape is basically a trapezoid that we have. We have to know the fluid dynamics in the AC. The corneal entry has to be perfect, and everything has to be within the incisional funnel so that we do not alter the ocular contour. So every case we need to have an eagle's eye while operating, because the things that you least expect and sometimes hit you the hardest. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Jayashree, you have tried to touch all the possible lacunae that may lead to leak. Thank you, Dr. Jayashree. It's so good as always.
Thank you.
Next, I invite Dr. R.C. Paul, sir. His topic is angry look next day, the inflammation and tests. Over to Dr. R.C. Paul, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Greetings from Kolkata. So maybe in the couple of minutes, as I mentioned in the my introductory note, that we'll be thinking for very small things, not talking of something which are really very much talked about. So one of the item is definitely angry looking eye. So when we do understand about the angry looking eye, we do understand, yes, these are of the certain pictures which are neither expected from surgeon's point of view or neither desirable from the patient's points of view. So in the couple of minutes, let me go through, take a round of it, how we could have prevented some of the factors which may really give a desirable effect, both in the first postoperative day and in the long term, maybe after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So as we analyze the surgery is nothing but an injury, but that is definitely with the permission of the patient. Definitely this is very well calculated, as Jayashree had said, you know, the tunnel length, etc., so many calculations are there. But in terms of phacoemulsification, if we see, if we broad list this injury list, that injury list we understand by, you know, one is thermal injury because of the heat generation of the movement of the phaco tip. There are chances of, you know, some mechanical injury by inadvertent touch by the phaco tip or by the second instrument or the other instruments going inside the eye, or maybe an indirect one, which is sometimes overlooked, is by the fluid. Now, fluid, what it does, it depends on the amount of the fluid which has gone inside and the amount of the fluid which has been taken out. I'll come into a little bit details into it. And definitely different toxins, either from the phaco machines and from so many, etc., things. So when I talked about, you know, the fluids, what we do understand, one of the particular term is known as what is the, you know, phaco time energy. This is one of the commonest indicator that what is the time spent for, you know, the removing the cataract. One of the overlooked factor is definitely, I gave an mark over here, that estimated fluid aspirated, 50 ml or 1 liter or 500 ml. Believe me, that takes a huge role. How? Because when we set our preset level of phacodynamics, we understand the picture of, you know, aspiration. Directly, it is related to our irrigation, and definitely one is power and other is the vacuum. So these are the parameters which are being fixed up, but the calculation starts from the aspiration itself. So I am always a proponent of law of fluidics. So advent of the technology and the techniques. So in this particular case, if I see with an intraocular pressure of, you know, measured 20 and with an aspiration of 18. Let's see, I am not going to talk about you or to emphasize you what is the advantage of, you know, how it is taking care of the posterior segment, how it is taking care of the optic nerve, retinal nerve, what is the effect of its short term on the nerve fiber layer. or the old age. But what is I am going to tell you, how I can reduce if my aspiration is less, if my irrigation is less, ultimately in totality, I'll have less trauma inside the eye, because I'll be pumping less fluid inside the eye, and I'll be automatically, when the less fluid I am pumping inside the eye, I'll be taking out the less fluid. And mostly we have to see whether it is jeopardizing our other effects of the phacoemulsifications out of these 8-10 steps. One is very important, is making an fragments and removing the fragments. Initially, yes, there comes one point that it can make our surgery a little bit slow, but I can vouch you, it makes you more safe. More safe means not to you, it's more safe to eye and definitely to the patients. Now, once I understand that I want to minimize the injury, because I know is more injury means more inflammation. More inflammation means damaging the blood aqueous barrier, and hence leads to complications starting from endophthalmitis or whatever in today's talk will be going to measure. So 4 or 5 components which are, can be noticed. One is this IOP issue. One is corneal edema issue. Another is, uveitis or the inflammation in the anterior segment, or the inflammation into the retinal segment, posterior segment is, the CME. So also we have to understand that certain procedures, certain eyes are vulnerable to having more reactions. Now, if I enumerate these cases, maybe extreme of age, we understand from our scientific understanding, a very old age patient behave little bit different. Young children behave little bit different. Diabetes, because of its obvious cause, it behave different. Trauma, PXF, posterior synechia, the inflammatory eye, this small pupil like IFIS is behave different. So here I gave you one picture of, the uveitic cataract having posterior segment. So let us, evaluate how really we can go for you. I'll be sharing with you one video over here. So this is an 56-year male, it's in routine. So we analyze, we have the option of dilating the pupil either by the mechanical device, or we can take certain simple, way. What I am doing over here, after injecting the local anesthetic, I inject the dye because I need to visualize more. And definitely after the high viscoelastics, the low viscoelastics, the combinations of, soft shell. It's nothing but preoperatively I have planned that I'll dissect the membrane which attaches the posterior surface of the pupillary area in the anterior capsule, as because of the, recurrent inflammation, which causes this synechia. So what I'll get out of doing this exercise? I can convert an, complicated cataract jolly well. From here, you can, appreciate that now it is. It's not coming?
Excuse me, sir. Sir, your video is little disturbing.
Maybe
it's you are missing at this point.
I don't know. My hair it is.
The last video also was not playing.
Is it so?
Yeah, we could not see.
But I don't know. It is here. It is moving fine. Is it a bandwidth issue or something else? I don't know. Anyway, I am to the end of my talk. So that is an uveitic cataract. I remove the membrane and then, did an fragment removal. So turning an, complex case into an easier one, but there is a most important issue. What I achieved with the removal of the membrane is I have decreased the load of, the cells and flare inflammation in the next day. And that it looks like typically in first post-op visit without giving you systemic steroid or enhancing the level of what is called topical steroid. So with these few words, I again thank you everyone. I don't know there is a technical hitch why this videos has not been displayed. I extremely apologize for that.
I think Dr. Arsipal sir, you can just play the video for once more. I think
Okay.
all backup team can help it out a little bit.
Yes, sir. I am here.
Videos can be played from the source.
Okay. It's good. Is it visible now?
Not now, sir.
Okay, sure.
Please show us from the.
I'll check from the source. Please. Just give me 1 minute.
Yes.
So you have to play the video directly.
Yes. That's what I'm doing. Is it okay now?
Not now, sir.
It is from the source here. I can help. I'm helpless. Let's check in the or with the next presentation. Let everything be complete. Then I'll check if it is possible. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, sir. Your presentation and surgical skills are always a source of learning. A true teacher indeed. But today, I think we have not seen the video. We'll be seeing it after the program. Definitely we'll see it. Next, we have with us Dr. Madhusudan Mandal. He will talk on dangling lens. Dr. Madhusudan.
So the screen is visible?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today I will speak another surprise regarding dangling lens after uneventful cataract surgery. If we categorize the problem, then we can find the following scenario. First of all, the decentered IOL in the bag, partially subluxated intraocular lens out of the capsular bag, dangling IOL with posterior capsular tear, and there is complete dislocation of the lens into the anterior or posterior chamber. IOL might be decentered in the bag, which can be spontaneously, more common in myopic and post-vitrectomy patient. Multifocal IOLs are usually more sensitive to this kind of tilt and decentration. And if the decentration is greater than 0.5 millimeter and tilt greater than 7 degree, then it may cause some high order aberration, especially for the multifocal IOLs. So in such cases, we have to counsel the patient and we have to observe the patient for further action. If there is a malpositioned or broken haptic after seeing the patient in the first postoperative day, we have to evaluate the patient regarding the degree of lens decentration, the accompanying complications and symptoms of the patient. And based on that, we have to manage the patient. We can manage by simple observation if the decentration is less. But if the decentration is more, then we have to go for the secondary intervention like optic capture and IOL exchange. I am sharing a video. Video is not.
Madhusudan, it's the same. It's not playing. So you try it from the source.
Okay, sir.
Madhusudan, you stop share and then share the video again.
Yes, sir.
That will be.
Just a minute.
Sir, do you need somebody from the technical team to help you? Dr. Madhusudan, do you need somebody from the technical team to help you?
All the videos are not working. So I think technical team might help.
If anyone can help, please help him.
Is it visible?
Not yet. Please start screen sharing again.
Is it visible?
Not yet.
If not, Madhusudan, leave it. You complete your lectures. If the time permits, later on we'll try to share our videos, right? Because it is in time-bound program.
Go to the presentation directly.
Sir, I've just asked someone from my technical team to come forward and help you. So he'll just guide you step by step. Just try that procedure once if your video runs.
Screen share.
Yeah, Ashish, can you help us out? Time is running. And with the slide presentation.
Madhusudan, why don't you share your screen without video? We understand, Madhusudan, you share your screen. We'll check for the video later on, if time permits.
I think there is some technical glitch. We can move on to the next topic. By
So Dr. Bhattacharya, can we request you, who is the next speaker?
So next speaker is me only.
Oh, please, you carry on.
So very unfortunate. Actually, we'll you please just get yourself ready and we'll complete it in the next part.
Sure.
Next is my topic. Am I audible and whether my slide is being seen?
Yes.
The topic is hero turning zero, the refractory surprise. No financial interest. Refractive surprise can be predicted in high myo, high hypermetro, post-RK, PRK, and LASIK patient, unhealthy ocular surface, post-vitrectomized eyes, post-keratoplastic and irregular cornea, and pediatric cataract. Now, why did this happen? In the early morning, if you see a autoref paper like this, we get nightmare. What are the causes? Capsular distension syndrome, IOL malposition like tilt, sulcus, phimosis, biometry errors, entry or procedural error. If the person concerned is copying from the machine without printout, then there may be chance. And if you do a bad biometry, wrong biometry, then we'll have a definitely a refractive surprise. What are the options available? IOL exchange, piggyback IOL, cornea-based PRK and LASIK, treat the cause like YAG capsulotomy and IOL reposition. In the immediate postoperative period, recheck everything, including the IOL calculation in the pseudophakic mode. Check the preoperative data, IOL power calculation. Make sure the right person has the right lens and rule out the capsular distance. In the multifocal and monofocal lens, if it comes within 2 to 4 weeks, go for IOL exchange and piggyback IOL. And PRK is also another option in monofocals. If it comes late, go for piggyback lens, PRK oblique LASIK, or IOL exchange is not done to avoid back compromise. Toric lens, very simple. If the IOL is rotated, then rotate back to its original position. If you have an exposure to the eye trace, it helps to know how much it has rotated and follow the instruction to realign to its desired axis. Or if you don't have anything, manually find the rotation in the slit lamp and take the help of astigmaticfix.com and correct to the new desired axis. I like to share a very small video. Here we put the input data, we put the IOL, desired refraction, the current reflection, uncorrected visual acuity, and we go for calculation. The website gives us the calculation and shows that if we do a 14-degree clockwise rotation, we get the desired result. Now, about the capsular distension syndrome, very common myopic shift due to the trapped visco behind the IOL. So there is a space between the posterior capsule and the posterior surface of the IOL, which can be confirmed by doing an anterior segment OCT. Now, what to be done? Wait for a few days. If no result, go for YAG peripheral anterior capsule where there is no haptic. If the refractive surface resolved, is very good. Other option, YAG of the posterior capsule, but definitely there is a chance of developing CME. And take the patient to the OT and do a visco wash. Prevention is thorough wash of OVD behind the IOL. A few words about the piggyback IOL. It's in sulcus IOL inserted as an additional lens to the original IOL. It corrects the higher degree of refractive error, particularly hypermetropic, and suitable for cases with OSD diseases. Piggyback lenses are less accurate than the laser refractive surgery. Prerequisite for piggyback IOL: primary IOL in the capsular bag, normal or deep anterior chamber, no glaucoma, pigment dispersion, normal corneal endothelial cell. Calcoflex lens from the Rayner or the care group. How do you calculate for the piggyback IOL? Hypermetropic error, you got the spherical equivalent error into 1.5. In myopic, it is spherical equivalent into 1.2. And this is a photo of the piggyback IOL 4-ply haptic. Now about the PRK and LASIK. Large range of refractive error, including astigmatism, can be corrected and should be done once the refraction is stable, typically after 3 months, with caution in pre-existing ocular surface disease such as dry eye. Cost and access may be prohibited. A proper counseling, meticulous biometry, A constant optimization, and IOL formula selection is the mainstay. We should remember an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. For high myope, the issue could be low scleral rigidity and posterior staphyloma. Low scleral rigidity can be avoided by doing an immersion technique and optical biometry, whereas in posterior staphyloma, immersion with the horizontal B scan and optical biometry. In the IOL power calculation, we go for SRK-T formula, Holiday 1 and Holiday 2 and Hofer Q. Beret 2 Universal is a newly coming up online calculator. We can very well do it. We reserve the cases where the axial length is more than 30 millimeter. We go for Haig's formula. For high hypermetropes, the issues can be corneal compression, smaller dimension eyes, less forgiving, and formula error. We can go for immersion and optical biometry. In the IOL power calculation, optimization is very important. Go for Hofer-Q formula. Barrett-2 universal is coming up again in a big way. This is the choice of the day. Haggis formula is used when the AC depth is less than 2.4 millimeter. For high hypermetropes, you should remember 1 millimeter difference in the axial length may lead to disparity even up to 5 diopter. And small shift in ELP may produce big surprise as the IOL is thick and close to the fovea. In the post-vitrectomized eyes, particularly in silicon filled, ultrasonic biometry in the sitting posture and optical biometry in the silicon mode. Now, what about the optimization of the A constant? Is to refine the refractive error. The different input may be keratometry reading, axial length, IOL power and model, post-operative refraction. We can fit in the biometry machine or we can go for online like dynamic IOL optimization. Now, this optimization means change in the lens constant to reflect the surgeon's experience with a specific IOL. And this new A constant will take care of the small systemic error. The specific formula, Holaday surgeon factor, SLKT A constant correction, Hofer-Q PACD correction. And after optimization, the result is 0.5 diopter defect within 70% cases and with 1 diopter defect in more than 90% cases. Take home points. Refractive surface are best prevented by the good biometry and the safe surgical practice and can easily be treated by the cornea and lens-based approach with a good outcome. Thank you so much. This is all about from myself. Dr. Madhusudan, can you continue?
I think let us complete first. Let us complete first round, then we'll check.
Okay. Huh? Okay. Next, we had with us Dr. Aniruddha Maiti. His topic is landmine behind dark cataract, retina perspective. Dr. Aniruddha.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Pal for giving me this opportunity. Well, I'm the odd man out. I'm the only retinal surgeon among the galaxy of cataract surgeon and anterior segment surgeons. Well, my topic is the landmine behind the dark or mature cataract in retinal perspective. Is my presentation visible?
Yes.
Yeah. So no wonder there is a dramatic linear increase in the rate of cataract surgery. But what will be the outcome when we can't see what's there behind the mature cataract like this? And in a developing country like us, the cataract being the leading cause of the blindness, and unfortunately, many patients visit at the mature cataract stage. And while selecting this, there might be some poor selection of cases when the fundus is not visible and which might lead to unhappy patients. Now, the primary investigation, what we do in a mature cataract or a brown cataract is the ultrasonography. Ultrasonography can give some information regarding the retina. There might be a retinal detachment. There might be some vitreous hemorrhage with subhyaloid hemorrhage. There might be staphyloma or some choroidal mass. But what about the other common diseases that can't be detected preoperatively by the ultrasonography? Like if there is a diabetic retinopathy and there is a mature cataract, we cannot judge what is the severity of the diabetic retinopathy. We can get some idea seeing the other eye, but exact situation of that eye is we cannot predict. Similarly, the diabetic macular edema, it is very difficult to predict what is the grade of the diabetic macular edema, whether it is present or not. And OCT has a very minimal role in a hazy media like mature cataract. There might be a CRVO, BRVO, which is also very difficult to predict what's there inside. If there is some epiretinal membrane or a macular hole or a vitromacular traction, there can be an choroidal neovascular membrane, or there can be some optic disc anomalies. There might be a possibility of hereditary disorders like retinitis pigments, although it is a bilateral, but rarely it can present as a unilateral case also. Inflammatory disease, whether it is an active disease or a scarred choroiditis is there, we will not be, we cannot diagnose seeing the anterior segment. We can have a history, obviously. So a proper history is definitely very important. Next comes the investigation. The macular function test evaluates the potentiality of the vision in the eyes with opaque media. As we know, the macula has the highest discriminative ability and responsible for the color perceptions. Now, what are the macular function tests in the opaque media? There is a battery of tests: Maddox rod test, focal ERG, VP, laser interferometry, the PAM, the entoptic phenomena. But what is important, we can just highlight few. The commonly used investigations like an ERG, which will actually give us an information on the health of the retina. What is the function of the retina? The A waves gives the photoreceptor function, and B wave gives the molar cell and the bipolar cell activity. We are not going into the details of the ERG interpretation, but definitely information of the rod cell response and the cone cell response we can get through the ERG. In RP, if there's an RP and especially unilateral RP, which I was mentioning, we will get a flat ERG response. Even in the congenital stationary 9 lens, there will be a flat ERG response. There is a negative ERG also. Cone dystrophy, we will see the 30 Hertz flicker response and the photopic response totally flat. In CRAO, we will get a negative ERG. BRVO and CRVO also, there will be a B wave, reduced B wave amplitude, reduced B2A wave ratio, diminished, the prolonged B wave implicit times, and multifocal ERG actually can pick up the macular pathologies. That is a localized effect can be picked up by the multifocal ERG. As in this case, the macular hole, we will see the responses in the central 5 to 10 degree will be diminished. Same with the epiretinal membrane. When there is an optic nerve problem, that can be easily detected with a VEP, which represents the integrity of the entire visual pathway. If there is a problem with the amplitude, so we can actually diagnose there might be some ischemic disorder. If there is a problem with the latency, if the latency is prolonged, then there might be a demyelinating disorder. If there is a history of trauma and there is no recordable ERG, then we have to explain the prognosis, where in fact it helps the surgeon to decide whether to go ahead with the surgery or not. There are other tests like laser interferometry, the potential visual acuity meter, which can actually give us an idea what will be the vision like after the cataract surgery. So these are very important tests, but unfortunately it is not available at all places. So the pearls are, if all the tests it's not possible to get all the tests. So the more important things are, we need to check for the RAPD, look for the projection of rays, and if the color vision is possible, which gives a cone function, the macular diseases, we can get a blue-yellow defect. In optic nerve disorder, there may be red-green defect if it is permissible. And macular function test, if it is available, we should go ahead if there is a clinical suspicion or there is some doubt from the history given by the patient. So the take-home message is a detailed history and the B scan, an assessment of the macula and optic nerve function, very important. The preoperative counseling, that is short and long-term prognostication, informed consent process in terms of relative risk and benefits of the surgery. This is the most important, as we know that no test of retinal function or macular function has 100% sensitivity or specificity. We have to depend on the detailed history and the clinical findings. Thank you. You're mute, sir.
Suraj, you are mute.
With you, when you are present, with all our fear and agony of the posterior segment will not be there, we know. Thank you, Dr. Maiti, for a so nice a presentation. Without immediately losing our time, we will just go to the next video bucket. First, I invite Dr. Smriti Rani Srivastava. She will talk on anterior capsule not behaving in order. Let's find the way. Over to Dr. Smriti.
Am I visible?
Yeah, now you're visible.
I'm very scared. I don't know what will happen. My topic is anterior capsule not behaving in order. Let's find the way. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yeah. My first case is a traumatic membranous cataract. You can see posterior synechia here, 1 o'clock position. Site of injury is also visible here. Viscoelastic is given, release synechia. When blue is injected after washing the viscoelastic with BSS to stain the anterior capsule for the better visualization. Nick is given behind the fibrous area. I'm trying to make a plane. The point is that either you avoid the fibrous area or include fibrotic area within the capsular axis. Cutting of anterior capsule is avoided as it creates imbalance in capsular margin strength and in long term affect the centrality of IOL, and also it affects the quality of vision. So you can see after a lot of struggling and juggling with the membranous cataract, I finally succeeded to peel out the anterior capsule. So it's completed. Remaining lens material is visible here. 3-piece IOL is injected, the better stability, and the remaining portion is aspirated. This was my case 1. My second case was a real surprise in OT table. A routine case prepared by the residents in OPD, and something was missed. While doing capsular axis, one can visualize anterior capsule is not behaving normally. You can see folds in the anterior capsule. It seems there is 1 degree zonular weakness. You can see this side, the capsule is behaving normally. Under low parameter, phacoemulsification is done. Apprehending the zonular weakness, I decided to use capsulotension ring. PTR is given to stabilize the weak zonular capsule complex and thus avoiding the displacement of the IOL in long run. So you can see well centralized IOL is here. My next case is an old man with white intermittent cataract with very shallow AC. Phacogenesis is noted in the OT table. And I started capsular axis with the Uttarata faucet in a very careful and the gentle way. So it's complete now. Apprehending the weakness in the zonule capsule complex, I prefer to use capsule hook. Stabilize it. Again, the routine phacoemulsification and multi-piece IOL is injected for better stability. Fortunately, the surgery was uneventful and it's completed successfully. Thank you.
Beautiful video. Good tips and tricks. Thank you, Dr. Smiti.
Thank you.
Next we have Dr. Amarendra Deka. He'll be showing a video on mature cataract bailing out in crisis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My topic of video presentation is Messure cataract bailing out. So, like this is a Messure cataract. Patient is 85 years old, almost 2 years back. And this is very common.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Your audio is not clear.
Okay. So it's idea most people use to make a image size calculation. There are several techniques for the same. However, I do believe that double laces technique is very useful and practical in almost all cases. Yeah, we have to make a small calculation. And after that, we can speed up the material
Dr. Deka, you can try, you put off your own video to, keep it off. You keep it unmute and run the video.
So switch off your video. Sir, your mic is on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Is it okay now?
No, just put off the video. Video off for you.
Switch off the video, sir. Then your bandwidth is...
No. Morendra, your picture, Dr. Deka, your picture, your own video, not the, screen the video. Yes.
So continue.
I think he lost the connection.
So maybe I think.
Yeah, it's okay, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, present the case. Share the presentation again.
So this is a 81-year-old lady with major cataract. I operated years back. This type of cataract is very common in our day-to-day practice. But this is very difficult to handle because there may be complications at any stage of inflammation. Here, most and foremost, there is complete cataract stage. Complex stage is important. There is cataract.
Ready.
Here we should make a small cataract stage initially. After that, we need to squeeze out the liquid lens method so that intraocular pressure reduces. After that, we need to make a small link and enlarge the cataract stage. As is here. And this is very predictable technique, and you can achieve round center details in almost all your cases. Next step is hydroprocedure. Here we should do minimal hydroprocedure because if you do aggressive hydroprocedure, there may be bulging of the capsule and ultimately eruption. Next is specific technique. Here, ideal technique is shopping technique. In this case, I tried horizontal shopping. Here, it is very important to protect posterior capsule as there is no clear hole behind the posterior capsule. What is which judicious use of this is very important. However, I skipped that step due to paucity of time. And this is required not only to protect the posterior capsule as well as to protect the endothelium because as there is no protection behind, we have to specify some pieces of nucleus at iris plane or even in the endocapsular bed, anterior circumference. So far, everything looks very fine. Operation is very uneventful, but now next step is aspirating out the remaining cortical matter. Here we need to observe minutely. During this phase, you can see there are some wrinkling on posterior capsule. This is very alarming and is indicative of jonular dehiscence. So now we have two options. One option is to put the lens, and second option is put the endocapsular ring and complete the surgery. And I decided to put endocapsular ring as I plan to implant single piece monofocal lens. So this plastic is injected. Now endocapsular ring is also implanted. And now we can see where is the endocapsular ring. And next thing is to implant the lens. Recently, this patient has come for check-up after 2 years, and the lens is still stable. So, what is the take-home message? Take-home message is if we have any complication during intraoperative period, we should try to handle it during intraoperative period only to avoid complications and surprises post-operatively. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Amarendra. Your video was fantastic, but the audio snatches has taken away a lot of problems, has invited. But keeping cool and strong nerve at the height of crisis, you have shown. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Dr. Manas Nath, who will be showing us pearls for managing decentered IOL. Over to Dr. Manas.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So I'll start sharing my screen. Is my screen visible, sir? The slides?
Yes.
Dr. Manas, switch on your video.
No, actually, I want to keep it in off mode to have a good
Continue, no problem.
Okay, sir. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, so I'll be talking about management of decentered IOL. So we can see this decentered IOL either intraoperatively in the early postoperative period, and sometimes we can see in late period as well. So let's coming to the first scenario. This is a young patient with lenticular coloboma with high myopia. The IOL power was around 7 diopter. My plan was to do a phacoemulsification and placing a single piece foldable lens within the capsular bag and stabilizing the bag with one CTR and a CTS. So after doing phacoemulsification, when I was placing the single piece lens in the bag, one of my iris hook was too tight, as you can see here. And while dialing the IOL inside the bag, that part of the rhexis margin got torn. And gradually it lead to a very large posterior capsular rant. So I was in a situation where nobody would like to be. But the next point was going in my mind was, how do I handle this case? I did not have the backup of a multi-piece lens. So I thought of fixing the same single piece lens either to the iris or to the sclera. But suturing a single piece lens to the iris can lead to iris shaping and pigment release. Literature has shown a good result with suturing it to the sclera. So I decided to proceed with the scleral suturing. For that, I am making 2 partial thickness scleral flaps exactly opposite to each other. Then a 90 Prolian suture, a straight needle on a 90 Prolian suture is inserted into antechamber opposite side port, and a 26 gauge needle is inserted from a distance of 2 mm from the limbus into the sulcus below the haptic, and the straight needle will be docked inside and will be taken out. Similarly, another straight needle will be taken out this time above the haptic as close to the optic haptic junction to form a loop. And similarly, the other haptic will also be sutured in a similar manner. And at the end, we'll see that the lens is well centered. Even at the post-op day 7, you can see that the IOL is well centered. There's hardly any tilt. So next scenario where the surgeon encountered a large PCR intraoperatively and placed a multiple lens in the sulcus. But next day, you can see that the lens is grossly decentered. So I took up the case for centering the IOL, and I'll suture the lens to the iris by McCannel technique, as the adequate sulcus support was not there. So after forming the anterior chamber, with viscoelastic, the IOL is centered with the help of 2 instruments. Once it is centered, the optic will be captured with the help of a spatula. You can see that the optic will be above the iris and the haptic is below, and both the haptics will be sutured with your 90 Prolene suture, one after another. And at the end, you will see that the IOL is well centered with round pupil. So to have a round pupil, the location of the suture bite should be mid-periphery. We should take a short suture bite and avoid excessive tightening of the knots. This is my last case. This patient presented very late, almost 3 years from the primary surgery. Here you can see that the CTR back complex and the lens is decentered in the opposite direction. So I decided to fix the whole complex, that is IOL and the CTR complex, to the sclera. For that, I'm passing a straight 20 needle, this time under the Hoffman pocket, and the straight needle will be docked below the haptic, taking your CTR as well, one below and one above to form a loop. Similarly, the other part will also be taken away with the same manner, one below and one above to form a loop, and then the suture will be sutured under the Hoffman pocket. So then you can see that the IOL is well centered. So for to avoid tilt in these cases, the fixation points should be exactly opposite to each other, and one should have confidence in patients, because these kind of cases can take longer time than usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manas. All complex made simple. It was mind-boggling.
Thank you, sir.
Next, I invite Dr. Amit Raj. He will show a video on large subluxation with double CTR.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, I am thankful to Suraj Bhattacharya sir and RC Paul sir for making me part of this IC. So I am sharing a case of traumatic cataract with inferior subluxation, 4 clock hours of subluxation. Let us see how I manage this case. On table, it was not 4 clock hour, it was around 7 clock hour, from 3 to 7 o'clock. 3 to 10 o'clock hour of subluxation. So I started capsulexis. In these cases, one should perform capsulexis with forceps, and grasping and re-grasping is the key for successful completion. So as cataract, gentle hydrodissection was done. In these cases, one should avoid nuclear rotation. As cataract was grossly subluxated, so CTR was injected. And phaco was started. So at this point, again, bag was very unstable. So I thought, why not I put another CTR from opposite side. The idea was to give equitable centrifugal force on the bag. So after implanting second CTR, now bag was comparatively stable. As patient was young, so nucleus removal was not difficult. As their removal of cortex was a little tricky, but it was successfully removed by contraction. A 3-piece IOL was implanted. After that, viscoelastic was removed. Then that may be done for any residual test in the AC. The surgery was completed. So thank you very much for kind attention.
The video was awesome. Thank you, Dr. Amit. We are running short of the time. I'll just invite next Dr. Sugaranjini. She will talk on Underneath the Cloudy Sky, Conquering Cataract with the Corneal Pathologist. The podium is yours, ma'am.
Good morning to good afternoon to one and all. I would like to thank Dr. Rasi sir and Swaraj sir for including me in this IC. And in spite of the technical glitches, their interest to teach newbies and inspire newbies like us has to be applauded. Today, I would like to present a video, Beneath Cloudy Skies. This is performed by my mentor. It's my extreme privilege to present this video. So a 72-year-old male patient presented to us 2 months post blunt trauma with hyphema, and this had resulted in a corneal blood stain and leading to a poor view during his cataract surgery. So we thought of using alternate surgical technique as the availability of corneal tissues is less now due to the pandemic. A thorough synechiolisis was performed, and the capsule was stained using trypan blue, and inflammatory membranes were noted in the anterior chamber. The peeling of the inflammatory membrane was done with an forceps, and it was ensured that the membrane was thoroughly peeled.
1 minute, Sugaranjini, your video is also not coming.
Ma'am, please move the slides.
Now is it visible?
Yeah, now it's
Yes,
perfect.
yes, yes.
Now it's perfect.
Okay. So this is the patient with the cloudy cornea, as I was talking about, and side port was made, synechiolisis was done, staining of the capsule was done, and inflammatory membrane is noted, and the inflammatory membrane was peeled off using a forceps. As we can see now that the view is still poor, so we decided to use an endo illuminator to complete the capsulorhexis. As it is seen here, the capsulorhexis was very easy to do after the endo illuminator was used. Every nick was very well visualized, and it improves the confidence of the surgeon as well. The endo illuminator can then be used to even check for any peripheral extent of the capsulorhexis, as in this case where it is confirmed that the CCC is well within and it is not extended peripherally. And now that an adequate flap of the CCC is made, completion of this rhexis is much more easier. And a complete rhexis is then made. A gentle hydrodissection is then followed, and a freely rotating nucleus is observed. Again, the endo-eliminator assisted us to do a thorough phaco. Phaco-emulsification was started, and the purview did not hinder the process. A successful cracking of the nucleus was also done using the endo-eliminator. And once the pieces are cracked, they are then prolapsed anteriorly and then emulsified easily at the pupillary plane, where the view is slightly better. Here the first piece, which is prolapsed anteriorly, is being emulsified. And once the first piece is emulsified, the rest of the nucleus is very easily eaten away. And now the posterior capsule status is being checked by injecting viscoelastic, and a good red glow confirms that. Also by slightly, here the posterior capsule appears intact. Hence with confidence we can insert the IOL and also dial it into the capsular bag with a better view. We can as well check whether the IOL has been placed inside the capsular bag by gently indenting, and we can clearly see the rhexis margin above the IOL here. And once this is done, a thorough irrigation and aspiration is done, and hydration of the ports is done to finish up the surgery. Thank you so much for having me in this IC. I cannot hear you, sir. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sugaranjani. It was a brilliant video. I don't know, Dr. Swaraj, you are muted or?
Yeah, no, I was muted by the host. Sorry, very sorry. It was just, I was trying to mention her. It's just mesmerizing. Fantastic video.
Thank you.
Now, we want to see our RC Pulse video, sir.
I don't know whether if time permits.
Yeah,
Let
please,
me check.
time is still there. You can. Followed by Dr. Madhusudhan. Yes, this will run now. Don't worry.
Is it shared?
Yes, yes.
Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
So,
yes, sir.
so my primary intention was to, my primary intention was to show you about, the impact of the fluid, the amount of the fluid is going inside the eye, and the amount of the fluid which we are being aspirating. So if you see here the the preset mark, the amount is, this is one is working will be 20 intraocular pressure, and with an aspiration of 16-18 doing chop and doing trench and removing the fragments, it is something like this. Main intention is this: when we calculate the entire amount of the fluid which is going inside the eye and outside the eye, the impact is this, that will be less indirect injury to the iris inside the eye, and resultant there will be less damage to the blood aqueous barrier. So instantly, whatever, because of the damage, the protein leakage and the cell leakage is there, we can minimize it. We can minimize it. The point against it, definitely it will make your surgery a little bit slow. But one point is really to appreciate, it makes our surgery to be safe to the patient and to ourselves. And another video, this is, can you mute my sound? Sound. My God.
You are muted now.
Sir, are you unmuted? Please unmute yourself.
You are muted.
Ratish,
Paul, sir, you are muted.
Paul, sir, please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So many people are there in assistance when we are in real need. not only the retinal surgeons, the young surgeons, those who are acquainted with. So this is nothing but a very simple procedures. In quiet uveitic cataract is a very simple procedures that we can remove the membrane which is adherent between the back of the pupil and the anterior capsule. So that serves two purposes. One purpose is we don't need to put any pupil expander like hook or ring. So it makes turn into a convex cataract, a small pupil into a normal cataract. This is number one. But which is really very important to us is because of the removal of the membrane, is that membrane develops because of recurrent uveal inflammation, the iris inflammation. So it decreases the amount of the load inside the eye. One is because which is being excited because of the the surgery, that can be reduced. So once this is being done, we can convert a complex case without using an iris expander, and really we can turn into a regular case. And the result is this: without enhancing the systemic steroid, topical steroid, we can deal it with like a regular cataract. That is my primary intention. So
sorry to interrupt you, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. We have just last 1 minute left to wrap up this entire session.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we are missing.
We
Yes, sir. Continue, sir. Continue.
No, it is there. So this is something the post-op, picture. So as this time doesn't permit, let's hope the world won't be like this. I am extremely sorry for the technical hitch. Meet you next time into the Mumbai with a physical crowd, which we are habituated with. So remain safe, stay safe, hope for the bright future. Thank you for joining this beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody, and thank you Chairman Scientific Committee, Dr. Partha Vishwas, for allowing us to do the forum. And Dr. Madhusudan, really we have missed your video this time. Next time we'll, in a very big way, we'll be there. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Panelists, everyone who joined in for this insightful discussion. It ended up to be a very insightful session for all our viewers as well. So thank you so much for joining us for this session. Each one of you, thank you for being here with us.